Hello, today we are going to talk about midpoint of a line segment. Our main learning objectives are to find the midpoint definition, find the midpoint of a line segment, find the endpoint of a line segment given the midpoint and the other endpoint. Midpoint. What do I mean by midpoint? Midpoint is the point that is halfway between two endpoints. Two endpoints of what? Of a line segment. As you know, what do I mean by a line segment? It's a line that has 2 points. It has a starting point and it has an ending point. Okay? So this is called a midpoint. What we have halfway, exactly halfway, this is called midpoint. A midpoint divides a line segment into two equal segments, because this is the point we have one segment, one line segment, and this is the other line segment. By definition, a midpoint of a line segment is the point on that line segment that divides the segment two congruent segments. Congruent means exactly the same. Okay? The first method that we use in order to do that, if the line segments are vertical or horizontal, we know that this is a vertical line segment or this is horizontal line segment. In the vertical and horizontal line segments, we have an easy way to do that. You may find the midpoint by simply dividing the length of the segment by 2. So we just count the number of squares that we have if it's done on a squared paper, or if the line is drawn on a graph. So you just count the length of that line segment and you divide it by 2. So let's say here it's like 4. You count them and you divide by 2. So we know this is the midpoint. Or you can do that using the second method, which we will talk about later on. The first method, I gave you a more clear example in here. In this example, as you can see, we have a horizontal line segment and a vertical line segment. In a horizontal line segment A and B, we have this is an endpoint and this is an endpoint. How do we find the midpoint? We just count the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we know that the length of the line is 8. You divide it by 2, it equals 4. So you will find the midpoint after 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is the midpoint. Once you find it, you have to write the coordinates for that point. Here it's 1 and 4. These are the coordinates. Okay? The x and the y coordinates. Now, we have another vertical line here, CD, line segment. You count 1, 2, 3. 3 divided by 2, it's 1.5. So after 1.5 steps, we will find the midpoint. Does that mean that the midpoint is 1.5? No, we will find the midpoint after 1.5 steps. Here is our midpoint. Now, what are the coordinates? Here, it's 2 for the x-axis and 1.5 for the y-axis. So, AB is 8. By counting, the midpoint is 4 units from either endpoint. We call both of these as endpoints. On the graph, this point is 1 and 4. The coordinates are as follows. CD is 3 steps. So by counting, the midpoint is 1.5 steps away, or 1.5 units away from the endpoint. On the graph, this point is 2 and 1.5. This is our second method. If the line segments are diagonally positioned, diagonally means it's either like this or like this. It's easier to use this method. More thought must be paid to the solution. When you are finding the coordinates of the midpoint of a segment, you are actually finding the x coordinates and the y coordinates. We need to know the x and the y in order to find the midpoint. This concept of finding the average of the coordinates, since you are finding the halfway point, it means like you are finding the average because you have two endpoints and you want to find half of them. So we can write that in a formula. We're going to use a midpoint formula. And by the way, we can use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint even for a horizontal and a vertical line segment. The midpoint segment with two endpoints, x1, y1, x2, y2, has the coordinates as follows. We're going to add the x together, x1 with x2, and we will divide it by 2. y1 with y2, then we will divide by 2 in order to find the coordinates. How do we do that? I'm going to give you an example. In this example, we have a diagonal line segment. The two endpoints for our diagonal line segments are minus or negative 3 and 5 here, 8 and negative 1 here. I'm going to write the formula. It's x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. All that to find the midpoint. So we say m equals. Now, what do I have as x1 and x2? Here, I will say that this is x1, y1. Here, x2, y2. One of the mistakes that usually happens that people deal with these two numbers together and these together. Yani they start adding minus 3 plus 5, which is wrong. You have to be careful. This is x1 and this is x2. This is y1 and this is y2. So in order to find m, I will start x1, which is negative 3, x2, which is 8, I have to add them, over 2. What do we have as y1? 5 plus negative 1 over 2. We will get back to our adding and subtracting integers rules. Here, if you are adding two integers with different signs, what did we do? We subtracted. So we have to subtract. It's 5. Which one is greater, 8 or 3? 8 is greater, so it's going to be positive. 5 over 2. 5 added with negative 1. Are they the same or are they different? Do they have the same sign, different signs? Different signs. So we subtract. It's going to be 4 over 2. Now we have to find our points. 5 over 2 is 2.5. 4 divided by 2, it's 2. So we will find our midpoint, 2.5 here. 1, 2 here. We will go up. And after 2 points from the y-axis, so here is our midpoint. Is that clear? Now, I want you to try to practice before you start with your questions. M is the midpoint of the coordinates M, negative 1 and 1, and C are given. Find the coordinates of point D. What is the midpoint of the straight line segment joining the points -2, 5, and 6, -1. I want you to do this question after you finish the rest of the video. Using the midpoint formula to find endpoint. Here we're not finding the midpoint. We don't want to find the midpoint. We have the midpoint. We have one of the endpoints, and we need to find the other endpoint. Find the coordinates. Let's say you have, I will draw it like here. Okay. I know that the midpoint of my line, they said here it's A, B. Find the coordinates of B, of the line segment AB. A is 2 and 3. I know this is 2 and 3. And the midpoint of A and B, AB, line segment AB, is 4, 7. I want to find the other endpoint. Okay? I will call them like x2, y2. Okay? So, we used to say, in order to find the midpoint, we have to add x1 with x2, y1, y2, in order to do that. So, in order to find here, this one, this is the x, right? So, x equals x1 plus x2 over 2. And here, this is y. Y equals y1 plus y2 over 2. What is x? We said it's 4. What's x1? I know it. It's 2. Do I know x2? No. x2 over 2. How do we solve such equation? I want you to think of this as we have brackets here. Do you remember solving multiple step equations? We have addition and we have division. But the addition is within brackets. How do we do that? We have to get rid of the division first because brackets is more powerful. So we multiply both sides by 2. So 8 equals 2 plus x2. In order to find x2, we have to get rid of the addition. -2, -2. So x2 equals 6. Now I'm going to move to the next part. Y. I know what is y. It's 7 equals y1, it's 3, plus y2, I don't know it, over 2. We're going to do the same thing. We have to get rid of the 2 since this is in brackets. Multiply by 2, multiply by 2. So 14 equals 3 plus y2, -3, -3. So y2 equals 11. Now I have the coordinates for the other endpoint. I know them now. They're 6, 11. This is how we find the endpoint. Please watch the video more than once in order to be able to solve such questions. I want you to watch this part, concentrate before you do the following questions. The questions that you need to do, this is question 1, this is question 2, questions 3 and 4. Thank you.